before you start making a routine decision tomorrow, pause for a second and ask yourself, whose needs is this serving, right? Is this decision serving the program or the students?
Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We're glad that you're joining us again today. So, Kathryn, we are like in the middle of winter. How are you doing?
Today there's sunshine, which is a lovely, lovely thing. It snowed last night, but then there's sunshine this morning. So that is a good thing. At the end of this week, though, I'm going to Florida with some girlfriends. And so we're going to have a blast together and see more sunshine and more warmer, much warmer, more warmer weather, which will be lovely.
Oh, that's so good.
How about you?
It has been cold here as well. And I know North Carolina cold is nothing like Chicago cold. I know that I should, but it's still been a little bit of shock since, again, last year at this time I was in Arizona in the last couple of years. So it's been a lot. But yeah, I think this week it's supposed to get warmer, sunshine. I'm excited because I have 3 student teacher observations this week. And I love going out into the classroom and just seeing them and the cool things they're doing and just watching. I feel like when they go from the semester before student teaching to the semester they do student teach, it's like they grow 5 years. It's just so neat to see them turn into these professionals. So yeah. I'm looking forward to that this coming week.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it'll be really fun.
Yeah.
So today we're going to do something a little that we haven't done in a little while. We're going to have an episode, just us, no interview. But it's, we're excited to talk about this topic about, common mistakes that we see when people are thinking about student ownership. And when was the last time we talked about this topic? It's been a while, right?
It's been quite a while. I think episode 64. So that's
okay.
Right? That's
it's been some time.
Yeah.
But, and we're not trying to frame this as negatives or anything for anyone to feel bad, because these are all mistakes that we have made.
Of course. We're all making these mistakes, right? And yeah.
So we're just trying to think about like ways that we can think about what's happening and just how we can reframe it a little bit to move forward with these ideas of student ownership in our classroom, and that we can continually be growing and reflecting. And I think that's the key, is that reflection piece for us. So before we really get into things for this episode, if you're ready to make powerful shifts toward student-centered teaching, we're encouraging you to explore the Pass the Baton Coffee Club. Members get an exclusive deeper dive audio extra and a Reflect and Act PDF download after every episode. Plus, you still have access to the full resource library.
For more personal support, our premium tier offers direct access to Kathryn and Theresa and a private Voxer group. Visit buymeacoffee.com/passthebaton to learn and join.
Okay, so let's get into it. We're talking today about 4 more mistakes that we want to try to avoid when we're thinking about student ownership in the classroom. So the first one is what I like to call the bait and switch. We've heard that term before, bait and switch, but sometimes we see it in music classrooms as well. And sometimes, as we said, Kathryn, you and I have even done it, where we let students choose something to kind of get them in the door, but then we end up just switching back to whatever it is that we want to do.
Yeah.
And so it's that little illusion of like, oh yeah, you're going to get some choice, but not really.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is just, we've done things for so long. We do things that feel comfortable, or we're not really thinking about how we slip back into something. It's just, we do what was comfortable. But I guess the idea being that if we're going to try something new or ask the kids for their opinions and their choices, then we've got to have some accountability on our side that we hold on to that.
Right. Right. Because what we see happening sometimes is that we use this idea of student choice or familiar music, creative activities to get the kids like engaged at the beginning, which is
Uh-huh.
great. We want them engaged, but then we kind of phase them out almost so that we get once the students are hooked, then we can shift back to that comfort zone that you were talking about, so we can get to
Hmm.
the real music or the serious learning, which we know is not necessarily what we want to be doing in the classroom. And it's not, again, it's not something that I don't think anyone's doing intentionally,
Mm-mm.
because we want the students to participate. We want them to feel successful in the classrooms. But sometimes we still have that narrow view of what we should be doing and what's legitimate.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we as teachers know, like, I know the path you need to take for the next step. But and we do, but but do we also, we have to be open to, but everybody learns differently and everybody does things a little bit differently. And the entry point might be different for so many different kids.
Right. Well, the entry point and the goal,
Yes.
right? The goal might be different for all the different kids. For you and I, our goal was music school.
Hmm.
But that's not going to be the case for
Mm-mm.
all the students in our classroom, and that is
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is when the students realize that their musical interests and their ways of making music aren't really the most valued in the classroom, maybe there's something that's just temporary, their engagement will start to drop. Right.
Hmm.
Especially for students who do have a musical identity that might be different than that's in the program.
Hmm.
Yeah. So here's how we're going to encourage that you kind of reframe this idea. If student centered music making is meaningful enough to bring students in, it has to be meaningful enough to stay.
Hmm.
Okay. Ownership means that you're honoring the students' musical identities as legitimate sites of learning, not just a bridge to something else. So if it's enough to get them in the door, we have to continue with it. And that doesn't mean that you completely abandon the
No.
things that are meaningful to you, but we have to remember that that's what is meaningful to the students, and that should have a place in the program.
Hmm. Yeah, they need to be able, if they got hooked because they could see themselves in your program, where else can they then in the program see themselves? Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So just keep in mind and just be aware of places that might be happening, and then see what you can do to alleviate that.
Yeah.
So kind of on that same idea, another mistake that we sometimes see or have found ourselves dealing with is this worrying about my program.
Hmm.
But in my program I need to do this, in my program we need to do this, instead of thinking about what it is that the students need and the students want.
Hmm. And that can be also really rooted in tradition, right? Like,
Of
we've
course.
always done something this way, that is, this is how my program works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of years that may have passed in a program, and it's really important to think about, is it?
Yeah.
No.
And we also understand that a lot of times teachers feel like it's their reputation too, right?
Yes.
Their reputation is built on participating in this event, or going to this kind of competition or things like that, which is is often the case, sadly.
Yeah.
So we've got these traditions, we've got these expectations, and a lot of times they do come from external sources. Sometimes they also just come from within us.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're putting those expectations on ourselves. We tell ourselves this story that, well, a good insert, band, orchestra, chorus, whatever program does these things, and we tell
Hmm.
ourselves this story that this is what is going to be expected, and this is what I want of my program.
Hmm.
But when we do that, then we just have students who are performers for the program instead of
Yeah.
just being instead of being musicians within it, and we really lose that sense of ownership, because it's not reflecting the needs and the wants of the students. It's just an avenue for compliance.
Hmm. And then when we talk about lifelong independent, lifelong musicians,
Mm-hmm.
does what we're doing match that? If that's what we want for kids, is our program then reflecting that?
Yeah.
So that's kind of an invitation, right, to like reframe it a little bit of, a strong program grows from student ownership, not in spite of it. So when students' interests and identities and goals drive those decisions, the program becomes a whole lot more meaningful and much more sustainable, and probably lifelong independent students or
Yeah,
musicians, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I imagine too, it's going to be much more fun
Yeah.
because
Oh,
if you think about, trying to get students to do something that they're not really interested in
right.
is often not a lot of fun. And that's also where that whole idea of extrinsic motivation comes in. We're trying to just, well, if you do this, and we're trying to just kind of bribe them to
Right.
do whatever this thing is. Whereas if it's something that they're excited about,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to put the work into it.
So that makes me think of Kathleen Jacoby, right? Is
Oh,
that who
yeah.
I'm, she would say, what do you as a group want to do next year? If we're going to
Mm-hmm.
do this, then we're going to need to do a whole lot of work here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a lot of work. And then if the kids are saying like, yes, but that's what we want, then when they're in the meat of it and it's hard, she can go back to, but like, remember, we said this was our goal and this is how we're
Mm-hmm.
going to get there. And then they're like,
Right.
all right, here we go, right?
Yeah,
But there's so much
exactly.
more, right? So much more buy-in than like, come on, guys, and just doubling down
Mm-hmm.
on something that they had no say in,
Yeah, I remember
possibly. Yeah.
that conversation with Kathleen because she was even saying that she was like originally not that interested in the one
Right.
event
Like, are you sure?
because it was going to be so much work, but the kids were into it.
Right.
And that was what made such a big difference. When the kids were into it, they wanted to put that work in.
Yeah. I kind of
And
remember her saying too, like the kids were into it and the community.
oh,
So
yeah.
she was kind of very responsive to just what, you know, their program instead of her
Mm-hmm.
program, right?
Exactly. And that's the meat of it, is not looking at it as my program. Well,
Mm-hmm.
my band has this and this and my band needs to do. No, it's this is who we have. What is going to meet the needs of those kids?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it. I remember in our episode with David, I was sharing the story about the director I was working with who was so frustrated that her kids weren't putting work into this event that she felt they had to go to. It's like, well, do
Mm-hmm.
you have to go to it?
Right.
Can we see what something would be meaningful for them? And it just took that moment to stop and say, oh, well, maybe we don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's also easy for us. The problem is we're musicians. We are all musicians who are coming to this job of music teaching. And I think it's very easy to sometimes put our musical worth based on like what the students and what the ensembles are performing. But we
Yeah.
have to separate those things, right? Just because I've always wanted to conduct the whole second suite doesn't
Yeah.
mean that that's what's going to be most appropriate for the students because
Well, I
yeah.
think the same thing goes to general music when it's like I go to a IMEC or a state conference and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that's so engaging and so fun. And then I take it into my classroom and I do it with my kids and then it's a flop. And it's like,
Yeah,
how is that? But I mean, I thought it was great, but again,
right.
may not have landed with my kids for many of a different reasons.
Right, right. So, yeah, when we're thinking about all of these things, it's not our program.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we still have to be aware of our community needs, the expectations of our jobs, things like that. But when it comes down to it, we often have a lot more wiggle room than we think
Yes,
we
that we
do, and
think. Mm-hmm.
we can really look outside to see what is going to be best for these students.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So what's another one?
Okay, so this is another kind of big one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when we think about student choice, we're oftentimes we see people make assumptions that students know how to choose, and that happens. We add choice to something, whether it's a project, repertoire selections, roles in the classroom, whatever. But we assume that the students already know how to make meaningful decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the case.
No. I mean, and you'll get some kids who are ready with you and will jump right in, but
Mm-hmm.
you'll get a whole lot of other kids who aren't comfortable with that or
No.
just don't literally know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, it's not, you can't just expect that everyone's going to jump in and be
Yeah.
happy about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're going to have some kids, like you said, they're going to be overwhelmed. Other
Yeah.
kids are just going to pick whatever's easiest. Some of them
Yep.
are going to completely check out.
Shut
I
down.
can,
Yep.
right. I can picture some kids who are going to be like, what's my friend doing? I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
kind of things. Because we haven't really worked through this is how we think through what choice I'm going to choose. And a lot of that comes down to scaffolding. We have to scaffold, and scaffolding isn't cheating, right? When we're
No, no.
talking about this, it's not cheating. Now we can't, the trick with the scaffolds is you use them as long as you need them, and then you slowly remove those scaffolds so eventually they're not necessary. But it's not cheating, especially when we're kind of working through things at the beginning. So
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've talked to kids about in the ORF world, there are certain rules of ways that we create things. And the rules are there because we are learning and we are learning to be composers. And then once are making money being a composer and, famous for it, you can break all the rules because you know how to break the rules, right? But at the beginning, there is much reason to have these supports in place to be successful.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've talked in other episodes about the idea about how you add the rules, if you will, but there's room for student creativity and
room.
student
Yeah,
growth.
for
It's not
sure.
like you're giving them a recipe so that every single student's going to be exactly the same.
Correct.
We're thinking about it, in those ways. So when we're doing this and when we're scaffolding, we can be modeling. A lot of times, even just like verbalizing how I am making choices about things helps them to think about it. Like, okay, so when I chose this piece of music, here were some of the things that I was thinking about. I was thinking about who we have in our ensemble. I was thinking about what kind of other music we're playing. But I verbalize that process so that the students can then be thinking to themselves, okay, this is how we do this. Otherwise, it just becomes a free for all that may or not be successful. And again, we want to help students gain that confidence and gain the skills to be able to make meaningful choices. And I think what kind of also goes along with this is that we assume older students already have these skills built in, right?
And if they could be, you get those kids that are, but you also get the kids who, if they've been playing the game of school for years, some of them are going to just look kind of deer in the headlights to you and just kind of be like, what do you mean? You're the holder of information. I'm the receiver. And then I spit it back out in a test and get my A, like that's how they've done school.
Oh,
so, yeah.
And that's going to be everything from first grade up through college, right? They just tell me what I need to do to get it done, because they're seeing it as very transactional as opposed to a learning opportunity. So even if we're thinking about students who are older, we can't assume that just because they're in high school that they know how to make choices or anything within this ownership idea. Is that we have to remember that scaffolding might still be necessary, especially if this is something that you've never done in your classroom before, that they haven't experienced in other classrooms. If they, like you said, if they've been playing that game for how many years.
I really see it as like, right, you're scaffolding and helping them in a first grade classroom. That might be some more hand holding or more supports for a longer bit of time compared to a sixth grader, project, or maybe not, right? But it's different with how long you might scaffold or whatever, but there's definitely steps that we have to make so we don't assume that children just know what to do.
Yeah. And kind of still just staying on all these ideas, we also don't want to reserve choice and agency for students who are older. I mean,
Correct.
Kathryn, you tell us every week, the littles can do it too.
And they want to, and for some of them, they haven't given up on how they want to learn in kindergarten, first, second grade. Sometimes it takes a little bit older for them to be like, oh, here's the game. Here's how I play. So like you've got some of those kids, they are just ready to go and don't have that, reservation. So
yeah. So I think if you start scaffolding the process young, then when they do get older, it won't require as much scaffolding and you'll be able to go farther. But then again, that's also assuming that you see students for multiple years, which is often a benefit of music teachers, right? It's not usually we just see them one year and done. We often get that multiple years of working with students, which really for us is such a benefit. So just however you do it, know that the scaffolds are there for a reason. We can't just assume that students know how to make meaningful choices regardless of their age. So keeping that in mind is a
Yeah.
good thing.
And I think the big reframe is that, when you try some of these things and then the kids maybe it doesn't go beautifully. Like the idea is like, don't stop at that. It's just where was there a skip and a step? Where was there,
Mm-hmm.
what did they need? Right. Because oftentimes I'll try something and be like, oh my gosh, they were so not ready for that. Like, and don't give up on the idea of the ownership piece. Just where did things, um, where was there a misstep,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
Okay.
there's one more, right?
Yes, one more. Okay, so the last one is when we think about ownership, we don't want to think about it as an extra. It's
Hmm.
not something that we add on extra. It's a principle that we follow as we design learning opportunities. Um, it can be an easy mistake to think about ownership as like a special project or an occasional activity, or even like, oh well, if you do this then you can earn the opportunity. No, we don't want to think about it that way. We want to just frame our mindset. It's a mindset shift towards this idea of student ownership.
Yeah. I can see that somebody would think of it as like, I'm going to try something after a concert, or I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
try something for the spring concert. But I think I can think of so many guests that we've talked to who have said, yeah, I did that popular music thing in the spring. And then in the fall, they were all with me and ready to, can we still do that, but do it with this music?
Right.
There, once you give them that taste of all of, that invested learning,
Yeah.
they don't want to turn it off. They want to keep going. So
Right.
you can't just be like, no, that's just for the spring, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good point because we've even encouraged people like if you need that first step,
Right.
do it in one of those weeks, the week after the
When you
concert, the week
the low
before winter
risk,
break.
right. Low risk
Yeah,
entry, right? Yeah.
exactly. But then from there, that's when you have to continue just building it.
Yeah. And so many people have said, because like for me, I've said, because I did Genius Hour with a second grade teacher, unrelated to music, I
Mm-hmm.
learned how to take some of that, the way we plan for those lessons into my instruction in
Right.
music for all, right? So you will learn, and you don't have to be like, well, I have to do those exact things. No, you just,
Mm-hmm.
where are there places that you can kind of expand within whatever you're doing in the fall?
Right. And the idea is that this becomes something that is truly part of the day-to-day learning, the day-to-day music making, is this idea that students have a voice and that students are have just as much ownership over the product and the process as we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal. So even when we turn it into something that students have to earn, well, like saying, oh well, if you do good at this, then you can, like, that's not really ownership.
Right. The taking and
That's
giving, right?
right, exactly. It's that give and take thing. um, so it takes the meaningfulness out of the picture because it then becomes, again, it's transactional. The students
Mm-hmm.
are working on one thing simply so they can get something else instead of thinking about it from a music making and a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so throughout all of it, try to reframe, instead of this being something that we add on or that we do as an extra. Try to just embed it in what you do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
continually have that mindset during your rehearsals, during assessments, when you're setting goals, hopefully setting goals with the students, when you're reflecting
Mm-hmm.
with the students, that you're thinking about how is this embedded into what we do and into our values of the program.
Yeah.
Kathryn, this makes me think, you often talk about mission statements, right? Or value
Mm-hmm.
statements. And I think when you talk to it, you've done it.
Well, yeah. I mean, just I think two things. My mind wants to go back to when you're talking about how you can embed it into routines and stuff. I feel like the kids will help you with that because
Mm.
from the
Mm-hmm.
spring term, when they're now in the fall, can we do this? Can we do that? Listen to those questions because you can embed them then in some of those things, right? With the
Absolutely.
content that's in front of you. But yeah, but then also I think then once you listen to those questions, then making a personal statement for yourself of like, I am going to personally grow in X, Y, and Z because that's what I hear from my kids, or I notice that, boy, my room needs to look a little bit different so that kids walk in and see themselves in my room. That's a goal for me, right? So I guess it's just, I think, listen to them first, and what are they asking you to do? And then what are your goals for yourself to kind of push yourself keep pushing yourself forward in that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I used to always put like a sticky note on my music stand to have those little things to remind myself, like, oh, right,
Yeah. Which
pause
is,
for a second. Mm-hmm.
yeah, to pause. And then also, then you go to a state conference and you're like, oh, I'm going to go to that session because that has to go back with what I said I wanted to keep working on. Or, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to read that book or listen to that podcast because that helps me kind of keep pushing my thinking. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about four mistakes we're going to try to avoid as we move forward in our school year and beyond. So let's do a quick recap. The first mistake was what?
The bait and switch, right? To
Right.
get them in, but then once they're in, it never really quite looks the same way. And if it's important, then it needs to stay in a routines.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And then the second one was the worry about me, worrying about
Mm-hmm.
my program, worrying about what I want, worrying about, thinking about everything in terms of me and my and all of that, as opposed to really looking at this as it's all of our music program. It belongs to the students, and I'm just here to facilitate and to listen and to help them learn and grow.
Yep. And then 3 was basically scaffolding, 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 right?
Yep.
Just the idea of offering choice and then thinking they're going to know how to handle that choice.
Mm-hmm.
They might get overwhelmed or all those things. So just making sure that you are modeling it and, just having the just right constraints and taking them away when they don't need them anymore, but just
Mm-hmm.
being there for the steps.
Absolutely. And then finally, thinking about ownership not as an extra or something we earn or anything like that, but instead thinking about it as this is how we are designing our classes. This is the mindset that really frames everything that we do. So just keeping that in our heads at all times as we're, thinking about our curriculum and the learning experiences that the students will have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've in our episodes we've talked about something to try tomorrow or something to get us
Mm-hmm.
started. So what would you say for someone who's like, okay, I'm ready?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think it's gonna be another pause before you start making a routine decision tomorrow. Pause for a second and ask yourself, whose needs is this serving? Right? Is this decision serving the program or the students? Right? And this is going to be anything from, like, again, repertoire, pacing, the way you're grouping the students, the goals in the rehearsal, any of that. Just take that moment to pause and ask yourself the question again. Is this decision serving the program or the students?
Yeah. And then you could always go a step further and say that question out loud to your students. And then, right? Because again, they will be so willing to share some things and
Mm-hmm.
give you some input,
Yeah.
and it could just be like thumbs up, thumbs down, quick vote, an exit ticket of some way,
Mm-hmm.
even just putting out a what do you call those? The box, I can't think of what those are
Like a little,
called.
like, suggestion box kind of
Yeah,
thing.
suggestion box kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's something, it's worth considering, because even if you do end up having to keep your say as the final say, you're making that reasoning visible to the students, and you're helping
Sure.
to model that shared ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't feel comfortable asking the students yet, that's okay. If you do, it could be a really interesting conversation to have with them. So that's
Yeah.
something to think about. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope that you have, enjoyed this episode. It's given you things to think about. Coffee Club members, we mentioned this at the beginning. I'm going to mention it again. Make sure you check out the deeper dive this week. It's the audio extra that you get, because we're actually going to make sure we feature one extra bonus mistake that you'll want to avoid. So Coffee Club members, you have that to look forward to. It'll come out. Usually it's later in the day, the same day this episode releases. I usually try to get it up there by evening time. So make sure you check that out. You'll have that one extra bonus. Okay, everyone, we hope you have a wonderful week. We hope that this has been helpful, something to reflect on, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate